Hi, I'm Brian Vaughn. I'm the kids pastor at Clayton Family Worship in Clayton, North Carolina. Miss Carmen asked me to share with you my story. So here goes. I guess you could say I was born into the church. My grandparents were super faithful, so they went every Sunday. And when I was little, I went every Sunday. They would pick me up, take me to church. I'd go to Sunday school and I'd sit and listen. And then I'd go to big church and I'd end up falling asleep. But every week we went. If it was raining, we went. If it was snowing, we went. If it was hot, we went. We went to church. So I grew up going to church. I never realized that church wasn't enough. When I was 10 years old, I went up to the front of the church and I shook hands with the pastor, and I thought that was enough. Over the next few years, from 10 to 20, I had a lot of obstacles in my life. There were people in my life that did unspeakable things to me. There were problems, there were bullies, there were so much. My parents divorced when I was in 10th grade, and it totally shook my world. I had a lot of health problems. I'm part deaf. I'm a diabetic. But if we only focus on the negative, if we only look at the negative things in our lives, we don't realize exactly how good God is. So Romans 8:28 says, "And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose." It wasn't until I got older that I realized that everything happens for a reason. When I was 18, I had the privilege to go to another country to serve as a missionary for a week. I met a little girl there that was deaf, that couldn't participate with anything because no one could communicate with her. That was my opportunity, because I had learned sign language, to communicate with this child that no one else could speak to. Her name was Lasing, and she's from the Dominican Republic. And I remember telling her how Jesus loved her and how Jesus died for her. And I remember the look on her face when she realized that there were people that cared about her. A few years after that, I was teaching 6th grade, and one of my students, his parents went through a really nasty, horrible divorce. I was able to pull that child aside and say, "Listen, I know that it hurts. I know that you're angry. I know that your whole world is falling apart. But God's going to use it for good. I survived it. So can you." Then a couple of years after that, I was working as a teen director under the leadership of one of my friends. And a couple in the church was going through a nasty divorce. And the husband was super bitter. And he and his oldest son devised a plan that they would cause problems and then accuse me of assault. A lot of people don't know it, but I was arrested one Saturday morning. The police officers showed up at my house Saturday morning at 8:14. And they knocked on the door, and I knew what they were doing. I'd already been made aware of it. And I went with them, and I just prayed. And I sat in a jail cell for 4 hours just by myself. It was me and God. And I sang praises to God, and I prayed, and I thought, and I prayed, and I quoted scriptures. And I said, "God, all things work together for good. There's got to be a plan. You've got to have a reason for allowing this to get to me." A few months later was my trial date. I was suspended from my job as a teacher. I was suspended from my job as a minister. I was put out of my job as a sales representative. So I had nothing. But the church where I was with, they rallied behind me, and they donated money and food for my family to have gas and to pay the bills, because God had worked it out. Then on the day of my trial, I was surrounded by people that loved me. And the whole time I'm thinking, I don't know why I'm going through this, but I know that I have to go through it. and it's going to work out for good. Now here I am, surrounded by people that are accused of other things. Elementary school is rough. Middle school is worse, and high school, you couldn't pay me to go back to high school. But we're constantly accused of things. And we have to remember that God has a plan. One thing I've always realized is if God holds the whole world in his hands, and he covers me with that, and then Jesus, the Son, said the Father and I are one, and the Son has his hands on mine as well, and the Spirit seals us, covers us completely, then nothing can get to me. Nothing can get to you unless God wants it there. A couple of weeks ago, I went to the doctor for routine blood work, and they found out that my numbers are not where they want them to be. And the doctor called me, and she said 3 words that rocked my world. She said, red blood count is off. She said, bone marrow test. And she said, possibly cancer. Now, when you use those 3 words together, it usually means leukemia or lymphoma. And I just cried. I cried to my mom. I cried to my dad. I cried to my wife. I just cried. And then I cried to God. And God said, if it gets to you, it had to come through my hands. And we started praying. I'm undergoing some tests to find out exactly what's going on. My new doctor, my hematologist, doesn't think that it's leukemia. He said, that's not where I'm leaning. But there's a rare blood disorder that apparently I have the markers for. I don't know if anybody's going to get something rare and I'm seeing it's going to be me. But God has a plan. So as I tell you about my story, understand that it's not all negatives. I have a beautiful wife. I have 2 great kids. I'm currently working in all 3 jobs that I love. I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to be a writer. I never wanted to be a children's pastor. But since I've started it, I do all 3 of those jobs, and I love every minute of it. I work at a Christian school that I'd never heard of before they called me and said, hey, can you send me your resume? We heard your name. We moved to this school. I was driving almost an hour and a half to get to school because this is where God wanted me. Then things are going on. God gave us a house that was closest to the school. God gave us people in my lives that will support me and are helping me. They're praying for me. God's given me the opportunity to help coach some sports that I love. He's really working it out for his good. Romans 8:28. And we know that for those who love God, all things work together. The negatives happen for a reason. The positives happen for a reason. Because God has a plan for those who are called according to his purpose. I'm going to leave you with a thought. In Sunday school, we heard the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They didn't see God until they were in the furnace. They didn't see what was going on. They didn't understand until they were there, and God proved it. God took me from a kid that was confused about salvation, that thought shaking the pastor's hand was all that I needed, that going to church was all that I needed. Then one day he said, you know what? You need me in your life. Then he said, because you have me in your life, because you're saved and on the right path, I'm going to give you everything you need. Some of it's going to hurt. Some of it's going to be painful, but there's going to be a purpose for all of it. Guys, if you need things, reach out to those that love you. God is providing you a support system. Go with God and be blessed. Love you.